it seems like you have a cool community out there in Chicago of like people that actually not just like, oh yeah, I refer some work to them sometimes, but like, no, we're actually friends, or we hang out, or we, go to the same church or whatever. And in DC or anywhere on the East Coast, I'm just gonna say that's not happening. We just don't care about anybody else. And but I want that though. That'd be the first thing I would ask for if I moved to Chicago. I'd be like, all right, we need friends. So.
Dude, yeah. It's I didn't realize Bean just walked in. He just left for a shoot now, but he's like, yeah, I know Adam. Like he went to workshop and I didn't realize that. That's awesome.
Yeah, he was cool. He was super, he was one of those guys where, I mean, I assume he is this guy. That's only my first time, but he was like the crazy, fun, social, and then people liked it, right? Because they're like, oh, well, he can be the center of attention and it's not me. And that's why we're photographers. And, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, we love Aaron. And so I'm like the old guy. I'm like, I know what you're doing, but it's fine. I support you. As long as everybody's happy, I'm into it. So it's really funny. That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah. And then, I reached out to you like 2 years ago. I was shooting I was shooting for Facebook in Chicago, and I needed another photographer that I could like trust, like not just like, oh, I need a second photographer that can, if I get like 5 images, I'll be happy. But I'm like, I need somebody that just in case they're like, hey, can you shoot this and not Adam? The answer can be yes. And you referred me to some cool people, and eventually I found somebody, and it worked out. So
awesome.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, we're here.
Amazing.
Pre-podcast banter should be a whole other podcast, I think.
Seriously.
I love it.
It needs to be. There's enough good stuff there that it should be.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it all in. And that's what happens to everybody. We're like, as long as we didn't curse and didn't offend anybody, let's go. Just leave it in. It's organic. It's fun.
Yeah.
We'll just go into it. I want to know. I just want to talk to you guys a little bit. You just started Rally Caps, which I think is awesome. I want to know not that I've been doing podcasting for a long time, but I love, I learned photography from Mark Wallace and Jared Polin. They had video podcasts that I watch on my iPad Classic 12 years ago. Man, this is, I never cared about showing my age until that moment. But podcasts have always been awesome. And then Serial revitalized it to, I feel like, the common public. And then, Serial plus Joe Rogan and conversations between experts and hey, what if we just listen to people talk all the time? But there's it's not NPR, or there's no limit. It's not 3 minutes, it's an hour or 3 hours. So now, in 2021, two guys doing media stuff are let's start another one. So I want to know what was kind of that inflection point where you're okay, there's a hole in our creative output that we're not filling. And we want to do this? Or was it okay, Eric already has YouTube presence, Steven's great at executing all these things, or whatever those roles are, let's juice that other project? Something I always say, and sorry, this is a long question, but something I always think about, this guy Sean West talks about, is you build your main fire, and then you can build fires off of that, but you have to have your first fire. And so I assume for most of that's photography, and then Eric is second fire is YouTube, and Steven, it seems like a second fire is YouTube and media. Mine would be my podcast, and you okay, once that second fire is big enough, why not start a third, or whatever. All that to say, is that kind of the mindset, or why did you start Rally Caps? Is a simple question, I guess.
We had been kind of toying with the idea for an entire year. I had always kind of floated the idea in the back of my mind of starting a podcast, just because it's I got to a point where I was feeling kind of sick of the grind of editing YouTube videos, and how much work goes into just 5 minutes of consumption from somebody's life, and then they move on to the next thing. And it's ugh. And while those videos can provide a ton of value, and you could build a market and a brand, which, I was able to do all those things, I felt like I still wanted to do something more long form, and wanted to connect with people in that way more. Just didn't know the vehicle to do it because of how busy I was between my own personal business and then, the side hustle of a YouTube channel. Yeah. And so when I met Steven a couple of years back, we just developed a relationship, and started talking about what it could look like for him to become an associate photographer in my business, which he did. And then, with that, I had sent him a wedding to edit. And in the process of doing that, we were just kind of on a FaceTime and kind of floating the idea around. That was when it was, the idea was kind of born. But even then I was like, I just can't handle it. There's too many things on my plate.
Yeah.
If anything, I think it was actually really helpful that it took us a year to kind of figure everything out, because turns out that year was 2020 and we learned a lot in that time. And honestly, I think the podcast is stronger now for it because there's more motivation to help other people pivot their businesses, diversify their businesses, and kind of help them in whatever it is that they're doing. It feels like there's a stronger why behind actually doing this now versus a year ago or roughly a year ago when we just kind of like, oh, it'd be really fun to do this. It'd be something we've both wanted to do for a while. It'd be fun to collaborate on it. It feels like there's a much stronger heart behind it because we've all just been through this crazy thing together. And now we can learn from a bunch of seasoned professionals who pivoted well and diversified their businesses really well. And also kind of talk about the hardships that came with that too, and kind of pull back the curtain on how difficult it was. Kind of like taking both, hand in hand.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think that there's the given metaphor of like, okay, guys, it's time to rally. Like you experienced 2020, like let's do that. Like I love that. Whereas like slow burn would be depressing. So it's just like, oh yeah, guys, like we're really motivated for 2021. It's gonna be a slow burn. That sounds like the opposite of what we want right now. If you named your house, named your podcast like More Time at Home, you're like, no, that's not what it is.
Please don't.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's so funny. I think I can get that sense. I only know Eric like a tiny bit more than you, Steven, just online, of course. But like, I get that sense. We were kind of talking about this even before the podcast started, and it's like, I've become one of those people, and it's a tension where I want to do something well, but if I can't get it to the level I want it to, I'm prone not to do it at all. But most of our heroes and what we would tell each other is like, bro, just go. Like, get in the car, start it, and go. And you're like, oh, well, I'd kind of like to know where this is going. I'd like to know like my ROI, right? Like your time. At least I don't have any kids, but I know Eric has kids. Maybe Steven, do you have any kids?
2 cats, that's all.
Yeah, exactly. One cat over here. So it's like,
there we go.
Once you have kids and a spouse, or whatever, and studios and other things, it's like, okay, like there is a tangible cost to my time or a cost if I'm not doing something. And, so that's tough, to want to take on something new, but having a year to like permeate on it, be like, what if we did this? Be like, no, that's a stupid idea. Like, we're never doing that. And you're like, okay, yeah, we have fleshed that out. That's dumb. Or, for like all that kind of stuff, I think is, it is nice. Even though, like, do you guys feel that you've had that year to permeate on it? I know this is something I feel oftentimes with projects. Like, do you feel late at all though? Like, and I'm not saying that you might, but like, do you feel like it would have been nicer to have this a year ago, or even with YouTube? Like, do you guys feel like, of course, I should have started in high school or something?
I don't feel so much like that now. I guess coming from the perspective of having a pretty successful YouTube channel, having started it 3 years ago, it just feels like what you're saying. That kind of is the main fire for me now. Like, it is quickly becoming my primary source of income, which is blowing my mind.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it just feels like every other project on top of that now is just gravy. And I have every right to believe that this project will be successful, because basically our handshake agreement Steven and I made when we started this was, we're going to just leverage everything I've built over the past 3 years to just dump into this podcast. And Steven, as long as you promise to kind of just produce everything, that's how we'll be able to make it work. Because I just can't, I literally don't have the capacity to do any more editing, any more booking, scheduling. Like, I have too many things. And so, so it was really cool to see Steven take that and just be like, we'll do it. And there's so many people that I've come across in the creative world who will not jump at that opportunity and see the potential. But Steven definitely saw the potential and was just like, no, we're going to capitalize on this. Let's do it. Even if that means that I'm going to be doing all the back end work. I feel like we've recognized, like, okay, Eric has put in like the 3 years of grinding already to like build a big audience right away, or at least, a foundation. And then Steven is putting in the brunt work of, getting it off the ground and moving.
And part of having that long view of the show as well, like seeing it as a business that we're starting and an entirely new creative endeavor that we're teaming up on together, is like, this is what it takes to build it right now. Doesn't mean we can't have editors in the future or other people to write scripts for us, or other people that can come on to the team, if you will, the Rally Caps team, because we can expand things. We can make it bigger and increase the size of the production down the road. But that's what it takes to get something lifted up quickly. You just need to buckle down. You got to throw that rally cap on, not to get too meta about it, but you have to really like be willing to put in the hours in order to bring these ideas to life. And it's so worthwhile. And to answer the question that you had asked about, whether or not we feel too late to the game, I honestly felt more late starting a YouTube channel in 2020 than I do starting a podcast in 2021. I don't really know why that is, but I think podcasting is still, as large as it is still in its relative infancy, and there's still so much potential to be explored there. So I think there's still so much that can be leveraged within that, and so many ways that we can stand out from the crowd. And I'm stoked to see what happens in this year and like the years to come as we continue to kind of create this brand and this community around Rally Caps.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That makes sense. I think it's I feel that too. Like, we just had the podcast was audio for a long time over here, and I liked it, and it was fun, and it was kind of like a one-man show by at least for me, unlike Eric, like I had no other big public thing, per se, or quote unquote an audience or anything like that. And I was just like, this is what I'm passionate about. I want to do this. Like, the whole show is like, for me, is like pulling back the curtain, and it's like, all right, tell me the sucky parts of your job, basically, or like, what are these hard questions, these things that like, we're not going to talk about, how you guys waited a year to start Rally Caps. Like, if somebody interviews you, you're like, oh yeah, we have this great podcast that we're going to help creatives, and it's like, I always want to hear kind of the downsides, or like, okay, like what were the struggles or whatever. Because I feel like that's most relatable, at some level, because I believe like it's our job, at least on, Instagram, YouTube, public facing things, that one, the highlights sell, and then two, like, everything we put out is our advertising to come back to us. And so I'm okay with that being, ultra positive most of the time. But it's like, okay, let's talk about the nitty gritty and like, imposter syndrome, those kinds of things. Yeah, we just started trying to do video for the podcast, and it's so much more work. Like,
yeah, it definitely is.
And it's just one of those things, but I feel like it's going to be cool, and I want to dive into the YouTube space a little bit. And so my kind of mindset was like, okay, I'll dive in with something I'm already comfortable with, and then maybe start bringing in supplementary, content videos. I feel like one thing too, Eric, like, other than Caitlin James, who already had a big bonfire, like, there's no other wedding photographer that doesn't feel that feels like somewhat knowable, reachable, approachable. I don't know the way to say that, like, there are big photography celebrities, but there's no like, I'm also doing the work. Like, usually it's becoming your main thing, but like, you're still grinding on other stuff. So that's really interesting too.
Yeah. I never thought that YouTube could be what it turned into. I have two friends, Daniel and Rachel, at Mango Street, who their channel just completely blew up 4 years ago when I first met them. And I just found myself in a fortunate circumstance where I like met them when they had just started, and I went to Thailand with Daniel to shoot a wedding, and we just got to know each other, and we kept up with one another. And Rachel encouraged me to just start one because I had no idea what it could be. I thought it was just like another way of marketing and couldn't even be a moneymaker. And at that point, it kind of like nobody really knew what it could be either. Like, people were starting to dabble in it, but definitely not to what it is now for quote unquote content creators. And so I saw the value in it over the past 3 years and starting to do sponsored deals and starting to get ad revenue and seeing how I could become an affiliate for so many brands, to the point now, like I said, where it's quickly becoming my primary source of income. And when we started Rally Caps, like, basically my other studio mate, Mike, who I'm really tight with, he started a podcast with his wife last year as well. It's kind of, they're in a down season. They want to start it back up again, but he just kept hammering the point, like, just start with video, just do video. You have that extra piece, and then you can siphon off from there. And so, going with that fire analogy again, our whole philosophy of this thing is like, okay, our YouTube edit is the thing we're going for first, and then we will siphon off to different things, whether it's an Instagram post, a TikTok post, a YouTube clip, like all these different things from the video, and then we have the audio source from the video as well. And Steven will definitely talk more about the technical points, but that's so valuable because of YouTube search engine. The way I see it is like, the way my YouTube mind works, like I just know nothing about podcasting. I rarely listen to podcasts. And so now I'm just kind of entering into the world and leaning on Steven and his knowledge of the space and what it is and what the potential is. But I know that keyword search and Google search engine is insanely powerful. And I felt like we were doing ourselves an extreme disservice of marketing our podcast without putting it on YouTube. Because I know, like I look at Colin and Samir's podcast and they interview Eric, who blew up on YouTube this past year. And they literally just make this, they make this thumbnail. It's like he gambled $17,000 for his job. And then like it got 150,000 views and all of a sudden their podcast is exploding, you know? And yeah, just like that idea in itself is crazy to me. And, it doesn't, like the video production doesn't have to be crazy. It just needs to be something. But the fact that we can make it look really, really good is obviously in our favor. So,
yeah. I feel like production value has been like one of my big things, like even with the audio and stuff like that. And then now with video. And I know with you guys, it's like, you know, it doesn't have to be incredibly polished. Like you said, like there's a few video podcasts where they're not necessarily like big shows yet, because there are those people, and those people have teams, right? There's 10 people ready to go, or they're live switching, all that kind of stuff. But it's there's little things that I've watched other YouTube podcasts or YouTube shows kind of do this thing where like so far what we've done is basically just leave me and the guest up, you know, the whole time. Like I have a mask on top of it and I'm like, okay, great, like here's the Zoom feed. Sometimes my video, because Zoom records video at different frame rates than our cameras, I'll have to do some finagling or like put in my other video file on top of me to make it line up, but because I don't want it to be distracting. But I've seen some people that are like, oh, anytime somebody's talking, I'm going to edit into them and do like a whole multi-camera kind of setup. And I'm like, that's too much work. Like, no, especially with us, like we're already talking too much. I'm like, nope, like we're just going to have the three of us up the whole time and your eyes can be your navigator. But I want to go back to something real quick. Sorry, Steven, I feel like you got the shaft here, but one, I just think it's pretty badass that you were like totally down to do, you know, what Eric called grunt work. But like, that is also my big philosophy is like, if you told yourself 10 years ago, you're like, hey, you're going to get paid to edit a podcast show and get to do some of the other media you want to do. And it's going to be great. And you're going to like, you're already working with somebody else who is also motivated to be successful. You know, it's always on an upward trajectory. Like they want it just as bad as you want it. Does that sound cool? And you're like, probably, you know? So I think that's really cool. Like we, one example, I just love the idea, and I'm sure we've all been this person at times where like, you know, I literally was just listening to your Jack Coyne episode, and it's like offering to mop the floors, metaphorically or not, and just be like, yeah, I'll mop the floors. I want to be in the presence of what is happening, you know, and to be closer to what I would possibly might want to do. And so, Steven, I'm just big hats off for you. Big caps off for you just being awesome. And yeah, I just think that's awesome.
Man, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I feel like there's a guy, his name is also Adam. His name is Adam Clark, and he was like a high-end web developer for Apple, but he loved podcasting, and he just created this site called Podcast Royale, where he basically just, you know, we record, and I don't use him, but like lots of big shows just hand him all of the stuff and say, all right, put it out there and make it happen. And obviously, you know, that could be like a full-time job, but it's a full-time, like we need those people, like everybody needs those people. And I think it's one of those things where even going back to like photography, wedding photography, I never outsourced for so long. And I was like, no, I want to control my edits. And not that I even think my edits are that great, but I was just like, I like being in charge. And, you know, and then you're like profitability, you know, you're like, it does keep it in. And then finally I found an outsourced editor who was like amazing. And I was like, oh, I get it. Like, okay, this is, this is perfect. And it's, you know, if you find somebody that you trust and is awesome and has the humility to be like, no, like I'm here, I'm still mopping the floors, baby. Like, I just think that's awesome. So yeah, we all need a Steven in our lives.
I mean,
but you also has your own YouTube channel too. So like, Steven, you're ahead of me. So I got nothing.
I have to, before you humbly take that, I'm going to jump in and say that Steven is a freaking beast. He just, like his attention to detail, his consistency is honestly, like, I haven't worked with anybody in the creative space like Steven. I trust him with anything and everything that he puts out. Like, he doesn't like, I don't need him to run anything by me first. We'll collaborate on creative things, but I literally just let him run with it because I know that his like obsessive attention to detail and perfectionism is going to take care of all of it. So even more, we have to give you more kudos there, Steven.
Oh my word. I'm going to keep staring at my coffee mug as if it's the most interesting thing in the world right now. Oh my gosh. You guys are very sweet. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. Steven, what's your take on that though? Do you feel like you're mopping the floors? Do you feel like it's a cool opportunity? Do you just like Eric? Would you do this for other people? What like help people who I think want to be in that place and want to be working with other people? And I've had people reach out and say, hey, can I just make the graphics for your show? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, hey, I'll gladly like trade a 1 hour mentor session once a month for you, something I can doesn't cost me any money, but I'm happy to dive into your business. But yeah, like somebody's got to edit these Photoshop thumbnails and it's not gonna be me. But like, how do you feel about that? Like, what's your mentality jumping into that? And knowing Eric as a friend, I think probably helped a little bit. But even for that, and then would you do that same thing for a stranger where you wanted to be in that space, similar to Jack and Casey?
Totally. Yeah, I think it definitely goes back to exactly what Jack said, just about like being willing to take on tasks from the get-go and just kind of do the work before there's necessarily a need for it. Just going above and beyond and delivering on that. In this circumstance, actually, Adam, I really liked what you said earlier about you kind of thinking back 10 years, like, would you ever find yourself in this position? Would you ever think that you could be doing something like this? And that's honestly a really grounding thought for me that I think back to often, because it was about, 12 years ago now that I picked up a camera for the very first time. And when I first got that little Sony CyberShot point and shoot camera, I never thought in a million years that I'd be where I am today, doing what I love for a living in a lot of different arenas. And that's not to say that, I should just be grateful for, any kind of success that I have in it because it used to be a hobby. No, like I want to keep pushing and keep getting better and growing and doing bigger things. But it is a really helpful grounding thought to have of, this did used to be just like something I did for fun. I would take photos on my iPhone and upload them to Flickr or whatever, or like put really bad Instagram filters on these things just because I liked the way it looked and it was really fun. That's a really helpful way to just kind of like stay grounded in everything that we're doing, of just like kind of recalling that as often as I can. But in this specific circumstance too of doing rally caps, it really feels like, I keep saying team, but it is like a team effort. It is Eric and I doing this together. That's awesome. Sure, I'm doing a lot of the hard labor and like the hours that it takes to actually put together a well-produced video podcast that has a lot of different facets of content and little, like Eric said, like paying attention and having really close attention to detail on all of these things. It does take a lot of time, but we're building a business. And that's just what it takes to build something like that. Yeah. And, for anyone who's listening and maybe in a similar position, if they want to work with maybe a creator that they don't know at all, or they have a close friend who they do want to just get something going with, being willing to just put that time in at the start is it's an investment of your time. Because it's not always going to be like that. Seeing it as like, okay, it's going to be maybe at least a year like this, right? But over time, it'll get easier. We'll develop systems that will help shave off time on certain aspects of it. And we'll get to a point where, like I had mentioned earlier, maybe we'll have like an editor at some point. Maybe we'll be able to take some of that work and spread that out a little bit and have other people come on and work with us on it. So it's not always me doing those like really, finite little detail kind of editing things. And, that's just kind of like, that's what it takes. at the start.
Yeah.
So I think just being willing to do that and having a good attitude about it and being just kind of open to taking that on is super valuable for sure. And I'm just like grateful to be doing this now.
Yeah. No, I love it. Something I think about all the time. And I love talking to other creatives about this and other photographers. And like, it's very easy to get caught up in the rat race, right? Especially on YouTube, right? Like if somebody was like, hey, name any YouTuber, there's so many, right? And it can feel saturated, right? And what we were learning is that it doesn't necessarily have to be, and it's your job to unsaturate yourself, if you will, and be like, okay, it's only I do this thing where I give talks. It's like, which I'm bad at right now. No, it's like the market's only saturated if you're trying to be like everybody else, you know, or like imposter syndrome only exists when you're not being your true self, you know, and it's because again, it's like it's only you, but it's you know, I think it's such a valuable thing that you guys are looking at it as work. And I think too, something I think about is like, even for me, you know, some of my story is like born in a small town, raised by a single parent, kicked out of college. And they, you know, now, like even in 2020, like I did a Patreon post on like, here's my tax return, like, you know, like just showing what I made, not to brag, but like kind of helping again, like pull the curtain back, you know, whatever, like Eric's net worth video, I think was really awesome just for people to see and like, okay, how does this work? And, you know, to reach those numbers, and, you know, I think like we get to do what we want to do rather than doing something else, you know, like I always say, I joke with my wife and other friends and I'm like, I'm ready for the shoe to drop and to be like, okay, I'm no longer getting any more leads. My skills are not valuable. I'm either too slow, too old, you know, whatever. And I'd still be like, that was a fun ride. You know, that was so great. You know, like if I'm, I used to play music a lot. And so I think of it as like, if I'm just a 2-hit wonder or had a good album and that's it, man, I feel so grateful that like we got to do that, you know? And all that to say, it's like, I'm working on this thing that's like the middle class, you know, freelancer or the middle class creative to where I think of like Broadway. And if somebody had to ask me, Adam, do you know any Broadway actors? I'd be like, zero. I know zero. Unless they were in a film first that I saw, and that film was probably Titanic or Die Hard. I cannot name any. But my philosophy is like, you know, there are actors on Broadway who we don't know, who aren't famous, who don't have swipe up on Instagram, who don't have YouTube channels, but they're getting to do the work they dreamed of as a kid, and they're paying their bills. And if they're getting a little sliver for retirement and a nice meal, I'm like, that's awesome. Live the dream as long as you can, you know. And I think, and even if that is all you do in life, I'm like, again, talk to yourself 10 years ago. You got to do that, and that just gets me fired up. I'm just like, okay, yeah. And then like, I think the three of us have this common theme of like, you know, we're gonna work hard and like put ourselves in good places, but then also now it's like, okay, we found that we're good at this thing. How do we steward that well? And how do we steward all of the bonfires and, you know, make sure that they're cared for and that you make sure they're good, you know, versus like, if Eric was like, okay, YouTube's the only thing, I'm not answering emails from anybody else, you know? So all that to say, yeah, you guys are kicking butt. I love that. Talk to me about, and both you guys being more experienced at YouTube than I am, like, talk to me about the nitty gritty of YouTube. I've loved SEO for, you know, wedding stuff. And recently, like, it clicked. You know, I heard something and it was like, oh, I need to start working on content, even for couples, right? Like, even if I wanted to, I could make some YouTube videos for couples that are useful, you know, like answer these common questions, you know, that I'm answering on for blog posts, right? But like, yeah, the big question. Talk to me about YouTube culture. I have only recently started thinking of it as a search engine rather than like an entertainment platform. So like, you know, Eric, what's your been an experience and like what has it gotten easier to make videos and come up with ideas, or was it easier at the beginning when you're like, oh, I have 25 ideas. When we run out, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, it was really easy in the beginning because I had a short list of things I was good at, and those were exhausted kind of quickly, but those videos popped off. You know, it was like how to do the Brenizer method, or how to use a tilt shift for creative portraits, or how to do a double exposure. And since it was so early to the game, those kind of were like base tutorials that people would search up. But the production value at that point was good enough for it to stand out, or the thumbnail was good enough, or whatever, or my dad jokes were funny enough to like keep people around or keep people people, hitting the subscribe button or like button or whatever. So it is much more difficult now with what you're talking about, with it being more quote unquote saturated, but it's a different game. It's just a different game now. The thumbnail and the title of the video, unfortunately, are some of the most important things on YouTube, because the game right now, as far as it stands with the algorithm, if you want to find success with like getting stuff out there, is you want to be put in front of new eyeballs on the platform. Yeah. And so if your video gets put into recommended, at this point, the size of my channel, every video will be put into recommended in some capacity. But if then the algorithm will know if it's good or not. If those new people who are getting, their eyes on that video are clicking or not, will then drive more traffic to that video or not. And so, I look at it more that way now, where if I'm doing a sponsored video for a brand, I'm definitely thinking about those things so that video's performance can do better, so that brand is more happy. But still just having low expectations. I was going to say this earlier I think one of the most sustainable things with starting rally caps now is just keeping our expectations very low and our excitement and drive very high. And a lot of that is driven by just like small wins, just like, we're sending texts back and forth like, oh man, 800 subs. Like, this is exciting. It's growing. It's slowly growing. I think this video got put into recommended. It had 100 more views or whatever, and not to say that analytics are the measurement of your success, but when you're approaching it with YouTube, it tends to be, unfortunately. So that you don't want that to be the main driver of why you do it, because you will burn out with just obsessing over analytics. But I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you want to use it as a platform for marketing. And so a cool example of kind of just the chaos that happened this past month, I walked in the studio one day. I had tweeted something a couple days prior, and it was just this whole joke of like, sets up all of this gear, like C200, Shure SM7B, all this craziness. And then at the end, it was like, hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about why gear doesn't matter. And so since that's a common theme on YouTube of people being like, just start with your phone, do whatever. And it's all these people with just like thousands of dollars of gear. That video really popped off. It was literally only a minute long. It took us 3 hours to make, but it has like 750,000 views now. And it was at this time where we were starting Eric and Mike, our new finance channel, and then Rally Caps. And so we were kind of just driving all this traffic over to these new things with pinned comments and links in the description. And in that sense, it can just be a very, very powerful tool with picking something that people really connect with, and it entertains them and makes them like want to engage with it more. That was a very long answer, but I really think YouTube is one of the most powerful platforms at our disposal right now as creative folks with whatever we're doing. And so that's another reason why we just want our podcast to live on YouTube as well, primarily.
Yeah. So just to reframe what you're kind of talking about again, you guys are like, I would describe myself right now, because we're kind of transitioning, as like audio first, but you and Steven, maybe you're the guy that answered this, like the video is first. And then is that kind of the order of operations, is like video? Do you still put out audio versions, at least on like Apple Podcasts or, Spotify or whatever?
Definitely. Yeah. So I think one, because video is so important, and like Eric said, YouTube is so powerful. Yeah. That is like the top level thing that we first work on. Yeah. But also two, from like a post-production standpoint, it makes the most sense to do the video first, because as soon as that's edited, then I just take the stems and move them into Adobe Audition, and I can just master everything a little bit more, maybe cut out a little bit of dead space that doesn't fit as well if you're just listening to it versus watching it and kind of seeing some jokes play out or something like that. Sure. Yeah. And then it's good for Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, whatever it is. So starting with video just makes the most sense, even from like a workflow standpoint.
Totally. No, that's really cool. That makes sense. I feel like I used to work for a large church and was kind of the like sermon weekend services guy. And so I worked a lot with like long form content, making sure that it was, everything was great, and render times taking forever, even today, all that kind of stuff. And it was like, the video, because we had multi-site campuses, so other people are going to watch this. We have to consider what they're going to see, all that kind of stuff. And that really helped kind of, make sure I know what like my production value is now and kind of like the order of priorities. But also too, as the three of us know, it was like, audio is still a priority, right? At some in the conjunction with video, because it's like we've all watched, like when The Dark Knight Rises came out and we heard Bane's voice for the first time, we were like, huh? Like we were like, is this supposed to be that way? And it's like audio is important. But it's like if you can have both, and have it be really good, then it's like, yeah, it's just gonna be an exponential thing. It's not 50-50, it's 100-100 if it's all good. That's really cool. Do you guys have plans for, or maybe you've already started doing this, like kind of like you guys might have talked about before, like, okay, we're gonna take a cool clip from our podcast and put it on TikTok or make a reel, or like, is it gonna be a whole separate brand throughout as well? I struggle with this. A lot of people struggle with this, where like I have a podcast. Should I post that from my Eric Floberg account? Should it only be rally caps? Should it be both? Should it be something that Eric is pumped about or that Steven's pumped about? And he shares for it to hopefully drive traffic. What do we link to from YouTube? What's kind of that mindset and strategy behind some of those decisions?
Yeah, I know for a lot of other people who have established channels, starting a podcast and kind of weaving it into the same content that they've been doing for a while is not super good algorithmically, if you will. It doesn't help all that much, just because people a lot of times are signing up to subscribe for shorter form content from you, and they're not willing to like click on that video and commit to an hour. Whereas if you set the expectation of like, no, most of our videos are going to be 45 minutes to an hour long. This is how you can listen to the podcast, but you can also see our guests if you'd like. I think there's a lot of strategy in that. That's why we wanted to do it that way. We wrestled back and forth between, do we do it on my main channel or do we make a separate one? And I think doing the separate also helps because we can branch out off of that once that fire is built up a lot more. Like we have plans to do eventually down the road to do more education, maybe some workshops, that kind of stuff, our own merch on that side. And again,
literal rally caps.
Yeah. Steven's very pumped about that.
I can't wait, man.
So like we're already dreaming about that stuff, but even more strategically, we have big plans of doing like short videos like I made on my channel just last month, where we're doing parodies of like stereotypical things on podcasts, and we're blasting that on YouTube and it's literally just on our Rally Caps channel. So people are interested. It drives traffic to them looking and seeing our other videos, our other episodes, and then being excited and wanting to listen to those and engage with the podcast.
Yep. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What practically, one, selfishly for myself, but then also just for people listening, like you guys are the first YouTuber people we've had on. So it's like, I want to ask, all the questions that people will wish that we asked when it comes to YouTube. Like we had Benj Heisha on before it was cool. No. And going back to what we talked about, I feel like Benj was late, to YouTube and education. And I even think he and I had conversations 2 years ago about doing Patreon, and we both were telling each other, you should do it, bro. And then, but it's like, how long do we have to wait for us to actually like buck up and do it? But, what is that strategy, in the photography world? I want to ask like very basic. So let's think like wedding photographers. People who don't want to change the kind of content that they want to share. They're like, no, I want to help my business, Ashley, Steven photography, whatever. Like, what can they do on YouTube that might be useful? Maybe they're not trying to go viral, but what can be useful, valuable for their hypothetical audience? Obviously that might be localized at some level, but like, what can they do? Any, thumbnail title tips and tricks? Should the thumbnail always, like, I feel like there was a time on YouTube where like Roman Atwood, right? Like family YouTuber, but every thumbnail did not seem very family friendly, but it helped get clicks. So, but obviously as wedding photographers, I don't know if we're, not in that world. So yeah, long questions, of course, the long answers. What are some of the strategies that people can implement in YouTube now? And then, for any kind of wedding photographers or people who are like, I just want to touch YouTube, I just want to play with it a little bit. What could they start with as like a fun idea?
I think it all stems off of intentionality. Like, what do you want the end goal to be is the question I would ask right away. And I know we talk about this a lot in the wedding photography world. What's your why? Like, why do you want to do that is the most important question, because like Gene, another studio mate I have, he just started a channel this past year, a few months ago. And his whole intention is literally like, he's like, I don't need the channel to blow up. I just want to get better at filmmaking. I want to get my hands on a camera and actually make things in the video realm. And so that's his goal. And so with that, it's just been like small, steady growth, a couple videos, a couple hundred views, 1,000 views here and there, and he's kind of developing a voice now. And now stepping into that next step, we had a whole conversation about just what do you want this to turn into? What do you want it to be? And that's really going to drive your intentionality of what you make. And so if you want it to be something that's just marketing your wedding photography business, you can definitely do that. You just need to be intentional about what content you're going to make. About if you're just doing it to try to book more couples, then you might want to go the route of this is how you build a timeline for your wedding day and things that are valuable to wedding couples. But you have to also, in that same token, realize that that's a very, very small niche of people on YouTube. And so if you're looking to go into it from that perspective, YouTube might not necessarily be the best route to do that, because like you'll find yourself making video after video and it's only catering to a very, very small crowd, and it's hard to grow something on the platform. But if your intentionality is only just to book wedding clients through that can totally work. If you're looking to grow the channel to get sponsored content and affiliate stuff and that, you have to kind of always be thinking in a way of how can I reach a wider crowd? And so I'll let Steven take this one, but like our whole intention of Rally Caps and the base of what we want to do is diversify kind of who we're bringing on. So I don't know if you want to take it from there, Steven.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our close circles are filmmakers and photographers and people in that kind of visual creative space. But our heart is, I mean, with those people, but also with the entrepreneurial spirit that it takes to start any kind of creative business, or just any business for that matter. And so we want to ultimately, after we've built up enough of a community and a following with the show, we want to branch out a little bit more. We want to bring different types of businesses on and talk with people that just play different roles in different types of companies, all that have some kind of creative slant to them, probably. Sure. But also, maybe do a series like a month on small businesses where we talk with, people that are just maybe not, they don't have the most social clout in the world, but we want to like hear from them and hear their perspective on what they're up to. We definitely want it to be widely applicable to really like any type of, young person that's just interested in starting something. They could open up Rally Caps and find 50 episodes that have a bunch of different guests and topics, and they might recognize some names. Maybe they don't recognize others, but they find topics that they relate to and, principles that across the board can be applied to anything that you're building. So that's the long-term hope for the show as we continue to, get more guests on and kind of spread that audience out. But it's also really fun to start with our circle and to start with YouTubers and filmmakers and photographers and kind of have that common ground with them. And also, knowing that a lot of our own followers and audience on our personal accounts and everything are those people that are interested in that, they can get really excited. Like I've gotten so many messages from friends saying like, oh my gosh, you had Mango Street on. Oh, that's so cool. I've been following their YouTube channel for years. Like, yeah, it's cool. Come like take a listen, like be a part of that conversation with us. It's just this really exciting thing to be able to share with people.
Dude, wait,
Steven is such a pastor.
I'm sorry, I awkwardly jumped in there, but could you share like how we've been pitching some people? This is what we're like definitely so excited about.
This has been super fun. So this kind of leans into what Eric alluded to earlier about the kind of education side of things, potentially long term. But we've been having a really fun time pitching guests by sending video messages to them. And not just a video message saying, hey, can you please come be on our podcast? But doing it kind of in their style, whoever that guest may be. So
that's funny.
We could talk about a few of the pitches we've done so far.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah.
Whatever you feel comfortable doing.
Yeah. I mean, the first one that we had ever sent, I just kind of done this on a whim, but I pitched Jesse Driftwood maybe 2 months ago. And I did it in the format of a vertical video because that's what he kind of originally blew up for. And then kind of incorporated some of his type of humor in it, kind of talked about some common ground that we have. Eric is obviously a mutual friend. He's part of this Dad Strides Strava running group, which I kind of referenced back to as well. And then I kind of like ended the whole thing with like a sincere ask, but also with a joke to kind of tie things off in so much a Jesse style that even I was like trying not to laugh as I was doing it. I was like, oh, I really hope he loves this kind of thing. But it was that kind of intentionality of, okay, you know, who is this person and how do we make them feel special? How do we make them feel understood and seen and heard? And not doing that to like mess with them or like play with their heart and like, oh, like guilt them onto the show, but just like show like, hey, we actually really like you. We really care about you. And we want to show that even in our delivery, even in our pitch. And we just want that intentionality to be like true in all the things that we do. Eric made this incredible video just a couple days ago pitching Danny Gewurz.
Oh yeah. Also, sorry, I totally just like went podcast host and like took a question from you, Adam. I'm sorry.
I don't mind at all. I don't mind at all.
I was like, wait a second, this isn't our podcast.
We're here to chat. I don't care. I love it. I support it all, man.
Cool.
It's all good.
The Danny Gewurz one was really fun. So this is kind of, so the first pitches we did were already people like I had been interacting with online. Never had like a full conversation. I did like one video chat with Jesse once upon a time, but even Danny Gewurz, like only a few DMs here and there, comments here and there on YouTube, but we're really excited about getting into kind of the realm of people we don't know at all. And getting strategic about these pitches where like we'll then take the production level to the next level and actually do like a half day of filming and that kind of stuff just to get like potentially enormous guests with huge platforms. But the Danny Gewurz one was really fun because he had just made this video about how he moved to Hawaii, and in his typical Danny fashion, like he walked into the frame very quietly and like grabbed a microphone. He's like, hey guys, you know, like really soft spoken. And so I set up a shot in our studio. I walked in frame and then same thing, just like, hey, we started this podcast and and I started talking like him, did like a whole minute monologue where I'm talking like him. And then at the end, he signs off every video like, I love you. Bye. And I did the whole thing and I walked out of frame and I sent it via Instagram DM and his response was just like, ha 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 ha, F, of course I'll be on. Like, this was amazing. So I think honestly, just that point of connection of intentionality, because it, as Steven was saying, that intentionality is showing how much like we're putting into this and how much we care about it. But also it's kind of unveiling our heart behind the podcast as well, because every guest we've had on so far, we've tried to do like some due diligence and research, and every episode we've opened up with this monologue, and we want to continue to do this of, hey, this person is blah, 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 and just like rifle off things and accomplishments that they've done and even start inflating it and making jokes towards the end. And then just being like, is all that true? And just seeing what they say. And so far that's just been really fun. So
no, totally. I love that. I think it's kind of funny. Like the pitching people to get on the podcast is such a weird world. Like there's definitely times when I have colleagues or people who are, I feel like at the same level, who I'm like, okay, I think they would say yes, you know? So part of me is like, I want them to say yes. But then there's part of the strategy where it's like, I usually will ping people who I'm like, I want to talk to you about a specific thing, right? You know, or like YouTube and podcasting would be this one, right? And like production value. And it's like, there are other people where they all have a bigger name, right? And they're like, oh, I've been on 100 podcasts. Like, why should I be on this no name from a guy who does not have swipe up? Like, why should I be on your and it's tough. And then for some people, it's like, it's hard to, you want to tell them if they don't know you, it's like, hey, we are not a press outlet. We're looking for a conversation, you know, and that's really important. And then at the same time, have that idea still be attractive to them and be like, okay, this sounds cool. And so you guys having like that custom kind of unique proposal, if you will, like, will you date me? Circle yes or no.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's awesome. And it's like, we just put 4 hours of work into this video, and not that you're going to say that, but it's like, come on, we're putting effort in, you know? And I think that's all anybody wants to see, you know, like I've been on podcasts where, I love doing it. I will talk to anybody, obviously. Like, I will jabber forever. And even at my like tiny level, there are times when it feels like a favor. But I don't mind that either. Like, I'm also like, okay, if I have it in my time, like I value, it goes back to my why, where it's like, I value open conversations about what we do and how we got there.
Yes.
And I think it's like, it's weird. And then like Steven said, we started off the year with like a really big guest, and
Pete Souza.
Probably our biggest, our biggest guest ever.
So sick.
But what's funny though is like is that happens, right? And you know, you share it everywhere. You're really excited. You know, it's cool, but it's funny. Like, the one thing that irks me still, and it's just pride probably, is where I'm like, we've had other big guests on, you know, or not as big as Pete, or, you know, we've had like, I've had Benj Heish, like Benj is also a hero in our industry. Like, he's cool. And so again, I go back to that one joke I made before Eric stole my podcast. That Steven is a pastor. He was like, we just want to invite people into this conversation, you know. And I was like, oh, Pastor Steven is coming through right now. It's just like, listen, we're gonna have a Monday night meeting talking about the things going on in the world, and we just want to invite you into this conversation. So no, that's really cool. That's awesome. What without giving anything away, you've kind of talked to us about what the plans are for Rally Caps, which I think that sounds awesome. And I think everything you guys do from now on is, it's like an additional encouragement that if you do it your way and are intentional about it, like, you, even in 2021, it can feel not saturated. And I think that's like, that's encouraging to me. That's encouraging to other people who are like ready to start or want to dive into YouTube or want to dive into podcasting, right? You know, like, it's one of those weird things where my podcast has always been a side hustle, but really a passion project. Like, it's not making much money, honestly, you know, like, at least as you guys know, but it's like, it's fun. But then, you know, I used to get asked to speak at conferences on like photography related things, or like ironically finding your why, or like SEO or something like that. And now it's like, do you want to tell us how to start a podcast? I'm like, what? Like, this is not my profession. This is like, you know, I took a podcasting class in college, and we had our first podcast, Justin Bieber, it was about Justin Bieber, and like,
nice.
You know, so now we're here. So started from the Bieber. Now we're here. I don't even know where we're going with that. Yeah. So are you guys on a consistent schedule? Are you posting like weekly, or is it kind of like as guests come in? Will you ever do an episode where you don't have a guest and you're like, hey, we just want to have Eric and Steven chat? Like, what are you guys kind of thinking?
Yes to both of those.
Steven, take it.
We are posting every
Steven,
Monday. We're posting every Monday. So a new episode comes out on all streaming platforms and everything. And then we'll post a couple times midweek, whether that's on Instagram or add, you know, a 45-second clip from the interview in Instagram story, or do like a 3 to 6 minute clip on YouTube, as well as like an extra little snippet kind of thing. So each week we're getting a fairly decent amount of content out of each initial recording. And then from there, I forgot the second question. What was the other part?
It was,
would you guys ever do an episode without a guest? Like, do you have plans for that stuff together too?
For sure. Yeah. It was, we had a really fun time recording that initial episode. That intro episode was a blast for us, especially coming off of the name change and everything. We just went into it with this kind of renewed energy and just did like a 20-minute one take. And it was such a fun time. We definitely have plans on doing more of that, but we want to keep it guest focused for at least the first, 10 to 15 episodes before we kind of start doing little tangential episodes of just the two of us. We've toyed around with the idea also of Eric and I each doing like our own 20-minute episode where he and I like do an individual one. We take a very specific topic and just kind of do like a little like 15 to 20 minute episode where we just kind of take something that's unique to our individual perspectives or businesses. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Go for it, Eric. Sorry.
You're good. The whole strategy right now, we're really trying to be strategy focused in the beginning and just like building is definitely kind of going through that popular social hacking thing where it's like, we want to creatively get big names that already have platforms where like we can bring them on and give the listeners a ton of value, but at the same time, just kind of dip into their audience, hopefully a little bit, because there's definitely crossover and cross-pollination. And that's a lot of the strategy in the beginning. And then talking about more strategically, like once we feel like we have a stronger brand for Rally Caps and people are coming to listen to Steven and I a bit more, that's when we want to start entertaining the ideas of where they would actually listen to us talking by ourselves and be interested in it, as opposed to like totally random dudes who they don't know. And so, a lot of that strategy, and even some of the strategy with like the shorter form videos on YouTube, like we'll drop the full episode on Monday, and it's kind of crazy so far, like how many views each of those are getting. And then because it's YouTube, like it just keeps getting views over time, and we'll just, for years, we'll get views and pop up randomly into people's recommended. But we also like to take a small clip from the episode and make it like a good 5 to 7 minute YouTube video where it has an enticing thumbnail and it has a good title, so that people can hear that one little snip and just be like, whoa, and then want to listen to the full episode because it was just posted 3 days prior to that, and then listen to everything else that's there.
Yeah. No, I love that.
It's much more likely we could get a new viewer or listener off of a 3-minute video than a 45-minute video.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like, that's intimidating to be like, oh my gosh, that's really long. That's a lot of time. I'm good. If they see Jack Coyne's face on a thumbnail and it's 3 minutes long and it's a good title, good graphic, like I'll spend 3 minutes watching that, and then maybe they want to listen to the rest of the episode later or watch the rest of the episode on the full channel later. It's a much easier way to kind of get people in the door in a more accessible way.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like it's one of those things too where like you enjoy the episodes where you're like reaching for the huge guests, but it's one of those things where too, at least for me, I feel like it's something we have to do so that people will listen to our other episodes where maybe that guest is not as big or in the same circle as them. Like, you know, for me, it was like Pete Souza was the Scranton White Pages, the whale, as Dwight would say, you know, but it's like, I have to do that so that we can support the other guests, you know, right? Like nobody's going to know, you know, what this guest or that guest or whatever, but it's like, we want to establish our authority in whatever the space is. So I totally get that. I love that. Well, guys, I would talk to you for frickin' ever, obviously, which is probably a bad thing. We'll all lose money and never post anything. Where can people go to find more about the Rally Caps? The Rally Caps, get me out of here. I'm the worst. Where can people go to find more about Rally Caps? And then and follow you guys on Instagram. So what are your guys' channels? Brag about yourselves, whatever you want to do.
Eric, take it away, man.
Yeah, you can find us pretty much everywhere at, just type in Rally Caps or Rally Caps Podcasts. Instagram's Rally Caps Podcasts. YouTube channel is Rally Caps. If you look up Rally Caps on any podcasting service, streaming, I don't know what I'm talking about, Steven. Spotify.
You're saying all the right words, though.
Yep. Yeah. Zencast. SM7B.
We are in a mutual club. Yeah.
Yeah. If you just type that in, you'll find it pretty much everywhere. So yeah.
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for being on. It was awesome.
Thank you for
Thanks so
having
much
us.
for having us, Adam. Appreciate it.
Guys, thank you so much for checking out the Bearded Hog. It really means a lot. If you can, leave a like on the video. If you want to see more videos, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications on when new videos come out immediately. Have a wonderful day, guys, and keep being awesome.